And there's a certain high about that, getting to the top of Half Dome. But you know what we capture often is that smile of success and the appreciation and whatnot when people come off the cables and they come back down. And they're just jazzed. You see hands in the air. And wow, that was amazing.
So today I'm talking with the founder of a backpacking and a hiking company called Lasting Adventures. This guy's name is Scott Gehrman. We're going to talk about Half Dome. And if you're not sure what I'm referring to, I know you've seen the picture. It's this huge granite rock that juts out about 4,700 feet above the surrounding Yosemite Valley. And some of you have seen the pictures of hikers holding onto cables going up to the top of the 8,837-foot summit. I think I got that right. And they look like ants. I know you guys have seen it. They look like ants climbing up the rock face. So anyway, pay attention to what this guy has to say because he's guided to the summit of Half Dome many, many times. So here's a little game for the listener. I want you to take a guess how many times Scott has guided groups up to the top of Half Dome. So maybe some of you are saying, 15, maybe it's 50. And if you're thinking 100, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's an expert. And you would be wrong because he's done it 150 plus times. He knows what he's talking about. And we're lucky to have Scott on the Hike Strong podcast today. He knows Half Dome and Yosemite National Park like the back of his hand. So welcome to the podcast, Scott. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm really excited to be here and share about Half Dome.
Yeah, man, you're the guy for sure. Before we talk about Half Dome and the approach routes, to get to the base, I want to note that you've been operating Lasting Adventures since 1997, and you've facilitated multi-day wilderness adventures for over 4,250 youth. I'm assuming that number's probably up past that by now, but am I right so far? Is that correct? That information?
You are correct. I started Lasting Adventures as a youth development program in the outdoors for the first, 10 years, almost maybe plus or minus. We were just doing youth trips and taking them up Half Dome as well, because this was prior to permits. And since then, we've also added on to that high-rated guide service. So adults and families, we also guide them to Half Dome and other places in the park as well.
Okay. Yeah, and so it was cool. I mean, it looked on your site, it indicated it was in about 2010 that you started the guide service to provide day hikes and backpacking trips to adults and families. And the reason you added the guide services was to provide scholarships to less fortunate children so that they could attend the youth summer camp sessions and more. Is that correct? Any, you want to expound on that?
Yeah, after, the first 10 years or so of guiding youth in Yosemite, it was just obvious that we know Yosemite, we know it well, we knew Half Dome pretty well. And so we could extend our offerings to adults and families, and through offering guided programs, backpacking in Yosemite, hiking, and other programs, any of our profits go to help us support youth and our youth scholarship fund and programming for our youth programs in the park and the other parks that we operate in as well.
Okay, that's cool. A lot of times people just have like one hiking adventure per year. I think everybody should do more than that. But let's just say it's tough for people to get out, they're busy, and they get to pick one, okay? So I want you to make your best pitch, okay? If they've got one trip, okay, this year or next year, that they visit Half Dome. And you can throw in Yosemite if you want. Let's focus on Half Dome, and then you can throw some Yosemite in there. So what's your big pitch? Why should people do it?
Half Dome itself, it's that iconic landmark in Yosemite that everyone thinks about when they think about Yosemite. I think many of us, even ourselves, we've used it on our logo for a while. It's that Mecca. Everyone wants to go to the top of Half Dome, say they reached the summit. I believe they have the shirts, I reached the summit, and whatnot. But in just that accomplishment of reaching this iconic landmark in one of the nation's most beautiful national parks is something that I think a lot of people are after. Half Dome, of course, is a permitted hike, hard to get permits, so we're able to offer that for them, and everything just kind of offered in a package.
That's cool. We're not going to get into too much detail right now, but we will talk about some of your backpacking itineraries that lead to Half Dome. But kind of make your pitch about Yosemite just quickly. Why is it so beautiful? What do you love about it? What do you want people to experience when they visit?
Yosemite, a lot of people, when they think about Yosemite, they think of that iconic valley where Half Dome sits at the end when you first drive into it. And the iconic Yosemite Valley is just beautiful with all these monoliths of like granite around you in different areas. It's almost like Yosemite and the outdoors, for that matter, is healing. And it's good for the soul. It's good for just getting out in nature. Yosemite itself is almost 1,200 square miles as far as how big it is. And there's so many different areas to explore. So, Half Dome is in an area that is definitely more iconic. There's more people visiting it, but also when you get out to some of the outskirts in Yosemite in different areas, you could just find peace and tranquility on your own and just, experiencing that. And it's good for the soul. I think it's good for everyone to get out their daily routines and then experience the outdoors and just kind of let go. And, the accomplishment that comes with summiting Half Dome is something that you can be proud of for years afterward as well.
So there's really good evidence that getting out of your comfort zone and into nature is like critical to a full life. You kind of alluded to that. You just mentioned the grind, getting out of the grind. What are your thoughts on that? Getting out of your comfort zone, getting into nature. Why is that so important? Do you feel like commenting on that?
No, I do. From a personal point of view, I could think of, I've been going out in nature since I was a young Boy Scout, probably age 11, and going out backpacking. And I just think that it kind of offers you, like I said, a chance for, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Actually, I've been going out since I've been 11 back on Boy Scout trips and whatnot. And that's when I was introduced to backpacking. But even Yosemite, for me, it was something that my mom was very passionate about, even when she was struggling with cancer. She had breast cancer, and unfortunately she passed away when she was 40 and I was only 15. But Yosemite was the one place that when we would go to Yosemite, it was very healing. Like, here she was at home struggling with her cancer. We went to Yosemite. It almost like rejuvenated her, and she would just be happy to be there. And it was like this medicine that you didn't have to shove down your throat, but you could just take just by being in the presence of it. And I think, experiencing that and even my own growth as a teenager, a young adult, and different hurdles that I've had to go through in life, I think the mountains, being in the outdoors was the pill I needed to get me through the hurdles I was experiencing in life. So it could be seen as a metaphor in life in itself, going to the top of Half Dome, but just going into the outdoors is very healing. As John Muir says, going to the mountains is going home. And that's how I feel. It has that healing effect. And it's rejuvenating as well. I've had customers come on our trips, clients who've gone to Burning Man, and they say, no, this is better than Burning Man. It's rejuvenating in a different way and whatnot. And this is my new Burning Man, going backpacking with you. So that's how I feel about the wilderness and the effect it could have on us as, individuals.
Yeah, I hope people listen to that. If they're concerned about, getting outdoors, that's partly why I'm talking to you, Scott, is because I want people to feel confident to do that. And, maybe one of their first hiking experiences, maybe coming out to spend time with you in Yosemite. So I think everybody needs to get out. It's just in our DNA. And I recommend listeners to read a book called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. At some point, I'm going to talk about that more in another podcast, but let's make that a homework assignment, folks. And that'll kind of tie into what Scott was just saying about the importance of getting outdoors. So I want to ask you about what adults can learn from children. I mean, you've had the experience of guiding children and you've had the experience of guiding adults, but there's usually something I'm sure that you see that adults that are missing in the way the adults maybe see things and the way that they, let's just say, play outdoors relative to kids. So maybe there's something that adults, can take away from what you've seen the children experience in the outdoors. Any thoughts on that?
I think, Marcus, you just said it yourself. I think that reminder to be playful, to have fun, to sometimes it's okay to not be an adult and to just let go of those responsibilities. It's really kind of interesting. We train our staff, our outdoor educators and guides, both as summer camp counselors to work with our youth and also as guides in the Yosemite wilderness. And when you blend that together, I'm also telling our staff, hey, those games and those activities that we throw at the youth, you could throw them at the adults on the adult programs, and they love it. They eat it up because it just reminds us, hey, live each day fully and make it your best. And, having fun, smiling, playing games and answering riddles and, all that good stuff. I think that's just something we learn from children, or it's really just a reminder that we're all children at heart. And there's nothing wrong with keeping those traits that we have, that innocence, that appreciation, that fun aspect. It's all part of us. And I think being outdoors and children remind us of that too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can relate. When you go outdoors, especially if you're in a camping situation and you've got the fire and everybody's sitting around the fire, it opens up really fun conversations, stories, discussion of your youth, and you tend to play games around the fire, fun word games and things like that, riddles you'd mentioned. And then, of course, when you're with kids, it's easy to facilitate that. They kind of drive that anyway. Okay, well, that's cool. Let's segue into this. I think this will be kind of fun. What is kind of your safety pitch prior to Half Dome? Your safety pitch, your motivational pitch. This is whether you're at Subdome and about to go up and you've got a group of people, or it's at the campsite the morning of. Just kind of pretend that we're in your pack, okay? And you're about to lead us. What would you tell us?
Oh, when we're approaching the Half Dome itself and how to be prepared for that? When we're going out of when we're going out of the campsite, which is called Little Yosemite Valley, up behind Half Dome that we use when we're backpacking, we have some there are strenuous switchbacks that are still going up through the forest. And then we're going to break out from those on like the shoulder right before Half Dome, where you get these amazing views all around you, the peaks around you, down into Yosemite Valley from different perspectives. And as we approach Subdome is the little climb right before the cables on Half Dome. And Subdome itself is somewhat intimidating. I've had people kind of going up these rock steps that they've kind of formed into the side of Subdome, and just the heights around them is kind of intimidating. And we just, we tell people, take it easy, a little bit at a time. Also, as you're getting up higher in elevation, not only are you maybe a little bit anxious and nervous, and that's going on within yourself, but then you're also feeling the elevation a little bit, because as you approach, especially 8,000, 8,500 feet, you're feeling that. So there's been times where, I'm pretty excited and I'm like pumped up and I'm going up there, but even I'm like taking those deep breaths because I'm feeling it. And it's all those things together combined. I'm anxious, I'm a little bit nervous, I'm excited, and of course the elevation's hitting me. Then you get to the cable. So I think those breaks are important. Remember to breathe, take it all in, look around, enjoy the sights. This is your own one time here. And just, there's no rush to finish this whatsoever. Maybe when you're doing it in a day trip, you want to get back down before it gets too dark and whatnot, but there's plenty of hours of light during the summertime. And so approaching the cables is another thing. As we get to the top of Subdome, people tend to look at the cable route and they go, holy moly, that looks intimidating. And one thing we always tell people is, looking at it from the top of Subdome does look a little intimidating, but if you actually walk down and go to the base of the cables, then look up, it's a little bit less intimidating. So we always encourage people that, hey, don't get too scared, right? At the top of Subdome, at least go to the base and check it out and give it a shot and that kind of stuff. I've had professional NFL players that get to the top of Subdome and they go, there's no way I'm doing that. This is my summit right here, the top of Subdome. And we're like, that's fine. This is your summit. That's fine. And
right. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And then the cable route, we also give instructions on how to do that as well. Did you want me to go into that?
Yeah, let's do that now. Just keep rolling with your thought process. Sure.
one thing we tell people is, every so often there's the post coming up and holding up the cables, and that post, and then there's like a little 2x2 that goes across those posts. So some people look at the cables and they go, oh, it's a ladder. No, it's not necessarily a ladder. That's just what it looks like when it's vertical, because it's got those, the 2x2s every, 10 or 15 feet or so. And then it's, so we tell people that, remember, the first time I went up Half Dome, because I think I was a little intimidated by the heights and scared and nervous and anxious and all those things, I just pulled on the cables with my wrist and my hands so much so that I think my wrist hurt for like the next 2 days afterward. So it's like, use your hands, but also remember that use your legs and use that power in your legs. You don't have to be holding on for life, hold on for balance and whatnot. And then don't go forward on the cables route until the person ahead of you has gone forward from that 2x2 or at least the post that's coming up out of the ground, because that offers you a safe place to rest your feet and come to a stop at each time. So I've seen many people going up the cables and they're huffing and puffing and they're a little intimidated too. And they're in between posts and they're not quite sure where to rest. Well, the best thing you could do is wait till that person in front of you has cleared the post in front of you and the 2x2, because then you always have that spot where you could kind of turn your foot, rest it on, hold on one side with both hands, and then you got a resting spot. And take your time, take your breaths, that kind of stuff. Don't be rushed by the people around you, and they could pass you if need be. I mean, you step to one side of the cables. One thing that people always ask, wait a second, how do people pass us if we're going up and they're coming down? Well, that's where you could get up to a post or a 2x2, rest your downhill foot on it, step over to the side with both hands on the right-hand side of the cable, and they'll pass on the left side coming down, or vice versa. But that tends to be the way. I think probably because that's the way we're trained to drive, on the right side. But it's like, yeah, same thing. And then another big question people have is, okay, I get getting up the cables. How do we get down? And that's a whole nother thing. And one thing we tell them is whatever's most comfortable for you. Because some people, they prefer to kind of go down backwards, one hand over another, and then use their legs and whatnot. I'm a little bit different, and some people have even called me out on it because I like to be looking down. So I kind of let my butt hang low, keep my weight towards the back of me, and just kind of go down with both cables until someone comes up, and then I just kind of rest, same thing, over to one side, both hands onto the right side cable, and let them pass, and then I still kind of use both cables as I'm going down, kind of in a funnier kind of, I guess I look more like a crab coming down that way, but that's what works for me. So the cool thing is when you're up a Half Dome and you're near the top, it kind of starts to level out in the cables. So when we come back down after we enjoy the summit, we let people try out the different techniques of how they want to come down where it's not as risky, it's not as steep. You try it where it's a little bit more flat and whatnot, and you could try some different ways, whether you're looking forward or coming back down, one hand over next, and whatever works for you as a person is going to be what's best in that situation. And that's the coming down. A lot of people will ask us, about safety gear. I don't know if you want me to go into that.
Yeah, keep rolling. Sure.
As a hiking company, we're not really carrying out or putting out safety gear by any means, because that puts us into another industry called climbing. And so we're not really climbing guides. But Half Dome isn't a climb. To go up the cables, it is considered a hike. It's a little bit technical with the cables, but some people will choose to kind of carabine themselves into the cables. And so what they're using there is what's called a via ferrata, because you're going to put on a harness and then have 2 lengths of rope with a carabiner on it. And the reason why you need 2 is if you want to be safe, and that's your goal with that, every time you come to a post, you're going to have to disconnect it to reach it over the post. So then by having 2 those tethers coming from your harness with 2 carabiners separately, you can slide up with one, clip the next one on above the next cable, unclip the bottom one, and then go up the next one, and you're never disconnected that way. We see maybe just about 10% or less of people using safety harnesses, and it really just comes down to the particular person and their own fear of heights. And I've taken people up who brought their own gear that they wanted to harness in and whatnot. and they've done well. And some people have said, wow, didn't really need this. So it really comes down to the individual person and what they feel they might need. Like I said, in our case, we don't provide it almost because we can't. It takes us into another industry that we're not insured for. But at the same time, if individuals want to bring that because that's what makes them feel most comfortable, they're more than welcome as an individual to bring their own gear and use it as well. Other than that, we've done this for, like you said, I've done it over 150 times, and a lot of those times with youth without safety gear, and they did great. It's safer than it looks for sure. Yeah, and I think that's pretty good for right now. I could keep going on and on, but wait for your questions.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to talk about gloves, grippy shoes? Any comments on that?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. We do recommend everyone the gloves because you're pulling or, balancing yourself, pulling up on a cable that can kind of get sharp in different points. So whether you're using any kind of glove works well, but no lies, what we put out is just some nitrile gardening gloves that are really cheap. You could get them at Home Depot for less than maybe $1.50 each. And they just have kind of like that plastic that they call nitrile right on the palm. And they probably get about 10 uses out of each one before they get ripped up. But they work great on those cables, and they're cheap and they're nothing special. Plus, if you have some bicycling gloves that you're fond of, you won't have to risk kind of tearing them up on the cables and whatnot. I did that one time years ago. As far as shoes, you definitely want a durable, grippy shoe. If I see people out there in what I think people call sneakers or tennis shoes, that's going to cause you to slip a little bit. You have to remember that this up the cables is on granite that has now been worn by thousands of people going up and down that same path every year. And so some people will say, oh, well, that's why I like to walk on the outside of the cables. Not something we recommend all the time because the cables provide a little bit of safety within it, but they find that the grip right outside the cable is a little bit better. But as long as you have a good grippy shoe, good tread, it's going to do great within the cables as well and give you that extra stickiness that you need to get up the dome. There is a couple areas as you're going up the cables where there's not that 2x2 because there's a crack in the rock. So you might have to go up, maybe 3 times the distance before you could rest on a 2x2 again. But you just see that coming and you just kind of prepare for it, wait for that person up ahead of you to clear the upper one and just kind of go for it. And then, like I said, there's a couple steep parts as you're going up, and then it levels out as you start to get up towards the summit.
Okay, cool. Comment on whether or not you have to bring everything up. Can you leave it subdome?
Good question.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
Do you have to bring it to the summit?
Good question. So on our day hikes going up to Half Dome, one thing that we do recommend and we provide for our guests is trekking poles and whatnot. And then, of course, everyone's carrying their day packs with, whatever snacks and water and additional personal gear they have. When you get to the top of Subdome, if I'm got trekking poles, I'm going to leave them on the top of Subdome because you don't need them for going up the cables. They'll just get in the way. Trekking poles, we just kind of find a little spot against a crack in a rock and leave all of our trekking poles. If you have other backpacks and stuff and you don't want to carry it up, that's really up to you. I wouldn't leave any food any place around there. You got marmots that are running around and they love to go into stuff. And once in a while, some squirrels and other stuff. And the birds too. They'll just swoop down and food left in your bag. So if you leave a bag at the base and there's food in it, expect that bag to be ripped by the time you get back down to it, because that's how aggressive the animals are.
Okay.
They're looking for the free food. But other than that, now if we're on a backpacking trip, we don't take our full backpacks up at all. We usually leave them down in the campsite down below, and then we use day packs that if you're backpacking with us, our backpacks come with a day pack inside of it that works great. It's like a stuffed sack with shoulder straps and whatnot. And it works great because then you can just break it out and use it for your day pack to go up Half Dome. Okay,
cool. All right. So what's the most common thing that people say about Half Dome after they complete it? What's common? What do people say?
It's interesting because it's that rush when they're coming down the cables. I mean, when you get to the top, it's phenomenal and you see the sights and whatnot. And then you also notice, hey, Half Dome's not the highest peak around here. There's actually taller peaks right behind me. That Cloud's Rest is another peak. But it still offers you these phenomenal views, but a 360 panoramic view. And there's a certain high about that, getting to the top of Half Dome. But you know what we capture often is that smile of success and appreciation and whatnot when people come off the cables and they come back down. And they're just jazzed. You see hands in the air. And wow, that was amazing. It tends to be the comment or comments that are kind of similar to that. And once in a while, we have someone will have, and it's happened more than once, it'll be like, can I go back up and down one more time? Just, on the cables. And it's like, do we have time for that? But it's like, that has happened because they've enjoyed it so much. So, yeah.
Right. What is the average time required to complete the round trip? Just the cable route.
I tell people, don't be surprised if it takes you like a half an hour to go all the way up. If you're taking your time and breathing. Some people, they have no issues and they'll just dart right up it. Other people, whether it's the heights, the elevation, you just kind of need your breathers on the way up. So there's no rush. And I would say an average of about 30 minutes just to go up the cable route. Coming back down about the same, plus or minus a little bit. And then you definitely want to take at least a good half an hour to an hour enjoying the top. Maybe make that phone call. Cell service works great up top. Take that picture of yourself up there, that kind of stuff. You want to call your mom, tell them you're up there, say hi, mom, whatever. Or your family, your significant other, whatever. But yeah, so it's half an hour up, half an hour back down, at least half an hour to an hour on the summit is good. Of course, different times of the day, the cables could get a little bit more crowded. It's not as bad as it was pre-permits before, 2010. But the day hikers tend to arrive at the cables within an hour or two of each other. And so you usually get more people coming up and down in between, I'd say, the 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. hour, right in the middle of the day. But outside of that, it's kind of nice. On a lot of our backpacking trips, we do the summit as a sunrise hike. We wake up from that campsite sometimes at 3 a.m. and get up on the summit right before the sun comes up. And just to be up there and experiencing that is nice. Plus, there's no one else up there. And maybe just a couple other people who are doing the same thing, but that crowd of people who come up as day hikers, we don't see them till later on in the day. And sometimes on our backpacking trips, depending on how the weather is, we might even opt to do it for a sunset as well. So you go up maybe the last night of your backpacking trip and you take in the sunset. Sometimes we even do a meal up there. Or the guides take up and do up a meal for you at the top. And then you come down while there's still enough light in the sky that you don't need flashlights and whatnot for getting off the cable route or subdome. And then you'll need the flashlights just on the regular hiking trail in the dirt down below just to get back to the campsite.
Okay, very cool. Let's talk about when the cables are down. Your thoughts on a summit attempt when that's the case?
Yeah, so when the cables are down, it's even more intimidating. And being someone myself who's not even that fond of heights, although I have done this 150 times, I've never done it with the cables down. I don't think I will personally. Now, I've talked to many other people who have, and they've got no issues with that. But I would definitely recommend like that diaphragm system as well, kind of, a system where you could kind of tether yourself into the cables while they're lying flat on the surface. So at the end of the actual summer season, usually around Columbus Day, is when they take the cables down per se. But really all they're doing is they're taking the post down, and all the posts will end up at the base of the Half Dome cable route, but the cables are all just lying flush along the granite. So you're literally picking them up and pulling on them more so than if the cables were up. So actually it's something the park doesn't allow us to guide when the cables are down just because of the risk involved. But many people do it that way. It's definitely more challenging, a little bit more intimidating. Like I said, not something I would do personally, but some people choose to do it on their own. And that's outside of the permitting time too. So there's no one checking you. You don't need a permit. That's one advantage, but it's definitely more difficult and intimidating and more of a risk as well.
So what months are the cables up?
So they put up the cables the goal is to have the cables up by the Friday before Memorial Day in May, so the end of May. And then they have them up through Columbus Day, which is around the second week of October. What will impact that is the opening, the snowpack that we had the season prior. So like last year when we had a 240% snowpack in Yosemite, I think they didn't have the cables up until the second week of June, just because of the snow. And what they're looking for is the snow that's more of a hazard on subdome and the cable route itself. And they wait for that to be clear, as well as some of the trails before that. But then once that's clear, they put the cables up and they allow people up. But on a regular snowpack year, plan for the Friday before Memorial Day. On heavier snowpack years, it could be pushed back a couple weeks. There have been some years where we had been pretty dry and they actually opened up earlier. And when they did that, what they did is they made some announcements about it, and they made all these permits available online for those weeks that they opened up early, so people could jump in and grab them if they wanted them.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about falls, because people do fall. I don't want anyone to be discouraged hearing that. It's a reality, but it's probably very rare. When you hear that somebody has fallen, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Like, what in your mind, you're like, okay, they must have done this, or they must have done that, or maybe they didn't do this or that. Like, what do you think of? You're like, uh-oh, not good. They probably, made a mistake, and here's where they did it.
I think, when I hear about someone falling, I just think that maybe they weren't as secure as they should have been on the cables. We talk about 3 points of contact when people are climbing. It's the same kind of idea when you're going up the cables, is to maintain, different points of contact and not be trying to rush it. And just, thinking about your method as you're going up, holding on with one hand at all times, and then maintaining, of course, your feet on the rock itself and that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. But it's very rare. So folks, when you're listening, don't be concerned. Just pay attention.
Marcus, and if I could comment on that too, it's interesting because when people tend to Google stuff about Half Dome, of course, the things that are going to come up first are more the tragedies that have happened. And usually the accidents that happen on Half Dome is because people just were not prepared or educated enough. Because the biggest risk on Half Dome is rain and thunderclouds and the granite becoming wet and slippery. So the best thing is you got to hold firm. If there's clouds coming in, there's no questions about it. You cannot be going up Half Dome. I've heard many stories of people being up on Half Dome, then the clouds erupt and it's wet and they can't even get down. There's even been a couple of times where helicopters have had to go in and rescue people off the top because they chose to go up when they should not have. So that's the main risk. I would guess that, and from what I've researched is, 90% of the accidents that have happened on Half Dome, and we're talking about, maybe once every 3 or 4 years, there's someone who slips or there's an accident, is because they chose to go up Half Dome when they shouldn't have, and the weather was not optimal.
Okay. All right. I think you covered it. That's interesting. Let's talk about your itineraries that do feature Half Dome. So I want to know how you built out your itinerary. So let's say you have Half Dome in mind and you're like, okay, but we're going to do backpacking prior. And I know you have 4-day, 5-day, 6-day. So talk to me about those, why you built them out. Why do you offer just single Half Dome days and then have an option for 4, 5, and a 6? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, it was only up to a couple of years ago where you could gain backpacking permit for any specific trailhead you're trying to do and then add on Half Dome to any trailhead. So we could backpack from any trailhead in the park, and then if we got Half Dome permits also, then head towards Half Dome and do that as well. However, a few years ago, they did change the permitting within the park that Half Dome permits would only be allowed on certain backpacking itineraries, thus certain trailheads, because your backpacking itinerary always has to start with your trailhead. And that's what you apply for when you're going for backpacking is your trailhead permit. So now they have a designated 5 trailheads that include Half Dome. So it's not so much that we built it out. The park's almost kind of assigning which routes we could do that include Half Dome now. However, many of these are ones that we were doing anyway prior to when they said you have certain trailheads to use for a Half Dome. So like our 4-day Half Dome trip includes the famous Glacier Point. And we called our Glacier Point the Half Dome backpacking trip. And so that one starts at the famous Glacier Point, which is another point in Yosemite that everyone loves to visit. It's rated high because of the views from up there back down into the valley and across right at Half Dome. On that one, you camp one night. Well, all of our trips start with one night in the valley. So we kind of meet and greet and get to know everyone. And then the next nights are out on the trail. So that one, the next couple nights, one night is in what's called the Illilouette River Canyon. And then the next one is what's called Little Yosemite, that campsite right behind Half Dome. And that's where we'll summit Half Dome from. Our 5-day version is one of my favorites. It goes by the Cathedral Lakes and whatnot. And that's actually one of the most scenic areas along the John Muir route, the famous John Muir route. I mean, you see Cathedral Peak and whatnot. So you camp by some high alpine lakes. You actually get a summit clouds rest on this one also, which is Half Dome's taller neighbor right to the, when you're looking at Half Dome from the valley, it's right to the left of Half Dome, right to the north of Half Dome, and it's about 1,000 feet higher, and it all actually offers a better view than Half Dome. It itself doesn't have a cable route, but it has what we call the spine, where when you summit it from the north, you actually have a 4,000 foot drop on one side and a 1,000 foot drop on the other side. And you're kind of going up the spine that's probably about 10 to 20 feet wide in certain spots with some rocks down below and whatnot. So you get a summit. That's our 5-day. We call it our 5-day Cathedral Lakes, Clouds Rest, and Half Dome trip. And then our 6-day version is called Tuolumne Meadows Half Dome. So you start a little bit further east up in the high country of Yosemite, and you get to go through what's called like the Vogelsang High Sierra Camp and the headwaters of the Merced River as it kind of comes back down to the valley, and you follow that all the way through. And then you get a summit at Half Dome on the last evening or last morning, as I kind of described before. And all these trips, I feel, offer a more immersive backcountry, backstage experience is what some clients have called it, because, you're not anymore, are you a part of that day hike rush trying to just go up and check off Half Dome? You're having this immersive experience in the great outdoors, and Half Dome is just this highlight at the end of your trip on, the second to last day or the last day of the trip that just kind of brings it all together too. So I don't know. I feel that, we've talked about before that sometimes, when you're doing Half Dome in a day, you have to find lodging before and after close to the park, which in Yosemite can be difficult anyway. And on these backpacking trips, you don't need to worry about that. You also don't even need to worry about the backpacking gear. We supply all that. It's included in our cost. So that's backpacks, sleeping bags, pads, tents, trekking poles, eating gear. We take care of all your food on the trip, all the cleaning and stuff, and we make it so it's an easier trip for you. And like I said, you get that more kind of immersive experience, connection with the great outdoors than I think just a day hike where you kind of feel like you're in this rat race almost to get up and back down. And it's a little bit more spread out over the multiple day backpacking trips.
Okay. So what's the most common positive thing that people say about their entire experience when they've done, let's say, a 6-day backpacking trip? Do they all end with Half Dome?
Well, if they're choosing one of the trips that include Half Dome, yes. But we also have a variety of other trips that don't include Half Dome. They can go to different areas of the park because of that. So there's a lot of other trips we do that are not around the Half Dome corridor that are also, quite awesome. They just don't include the Half Dome summit. As far as like some of the stuff that people have shared with us, I was thinking about when you said that, I ran into a couple twins who attended, a couple twins, of course, they come as a couple, but they attended our trip as youth back in the day, and they did it multiple times. They came back summer after summer, and I ran into them a few years ago, and they saw me on the lake up here by Lake Tahoe, and they said, "Scott, Mr. Gehrman, you know what? I've traveled all around this world. I've done this, but nothing compares to that backpacking trip and summiting Half Dome that we did with you." And it stands out as a different kind of experience, I feel. And it's an accomplishment too, because it's not just checking into the hotels and moving your baggage. It's kind of like you're taking care of yourself in the great outdoors and you're embarking on this expedition, per se, for multiple days when it's backpacking. And then it's this transformative experience in the outdoors. And that's what I think resonated with me and resonates with the clients as well.
Okay. In terms of miles and elevation gain, just to get some data, it's how I put together a lot of my fitness programs, or just about all of them. On a 6-day backpacking trip that includes Half Dome, what are the total miles and total elevation gain of that, if you can recall?
Oh, good question. I had to click it on our website just to get the quick answer too. But the 6-day Tuolumne Meadows to Half Dome is a 37-mile trip. That includes the side hike up Half Dome without the packs, which the side hike is about a 7-mile round trip, 3.5 miles from that campsite going up, 3.5 miles coming back down. And elevation difference, I mean, you're starting this trek at about 8,500 feet in Tuolumne Meadows. And the high point you get is usually around day 2, about where you're going over a pass that's closer to about 10,000 feet. And then you're dropping back down in elevation throughout that backpack trip. And you're camping up at Little Yosemite Valley, which I believe off the top of my head is closer to about 6,500 feet. And then from there, then you summit Half Dome and you go back up. And that's where you're going back up to about 8837, as you said, to summit that.
Whenever you watch videos online about these people who go ahead and do Half Dome, they're always fussing about the mist trail. They love the mist trail. It's beautiful. But they're always fussing about the 600 stairs, they have to complete, as well as the other aspects. Maybe it's prior or just after. Can you talk about the challenges of that section?
When you're thinking about doing Half Dome in a day from the valley floor, which is about 4,000 feet, and you're going up to 88 plus 8,837 feet, and you're doing that within, 7 to 8 miles. And I say 7 to 8 because it does, as you're going up the famous mist trail, there's a couple little side trails that connect you to what's called the John Muir Trail that you could also kind of divert to and still go up. So the John Muir Trail tends to be about a mile longer overall. And that's why some people say that, the whole Half Dome hike could be anywhere from 14 to 16 miles. It depends on what connection of trails you use going up and back down. So the famous mist trail, M-I-S-T, it's funny, some people call it Misty or whatnot, different variations on it. But the mist trail goes by 2 famous waterfalls on your way up. Vernal Falls first, and then Nevada Falls. So you're walking right beside these waterfalls, and that's where you're actually incurring a lot of these stone steps that they've made over the years. And sometimes trail crews out there are refurbishing the steps too, or making them better as well. And it's kind of cool to see that. They're not using, they're just using their hands and picks and shovels and all that too to move big rocks around. But these steps, they're intimidating. There's a lot of them. And, I've gotten so used to them, you just almost kind of put your head down and just kind of act like you're a machine sometimes and just kind of going to get through this. But like I said earlier, kind of take in the time and come to a little area where you could take a breath, look around, check out these amazing waterfalls you're walking right beside, as well as you get to walk, right to the top of the waterfall, right where it almost goes over. There are gates around there and stuff. Be mindful of those. Unfortunately, over the years, some people have avoided those and climbed right over, and they've also ended their life in doing that as well, because they go out like above Nevada Fall. It looks like there's this little island and just a little stream of the water, right? A little island right before where it goes off the edge. And people tried to go out to that, and they climbed over a gate. The gate's there for a reason, and they 3 of them got washed over one year to their death, unfortunately. So these steps are intimidating. It's a lot of uphill. I think, what I said earlier about your breathing and everything, being mindful of that and taking, the necessary stops to kind of catch your breath and taking the views and the sights and snap that picture so you can remember it later. But it's rewarding too. That's one of the things about this hike. When I compare it to, the Yosemite Falls hike across the valley, that's more switchback straight up and you get great views out to the valley. But I feel that the mist trail is almost a little bit easier just because of how you go up some steps, then it levels out for a little bit. Then you go up some more steps and it levels out. And, that's because even these waterfalls are creating what's known as just a natural staircase. When you look at it from afar, if you're like Glacier Point, looking across to where the mist trail is, you can see that Nevada Falls and Bernal Falls are just making a natural staircase. Other waterfalls in the park do the same thing as they come down over the rocks. It's like this natural staircase. And that's what you're climbing up as you're going up the actual staircase of rocks that we made for human beings to go up, is that you're going up beside the natural waterfall staircase that is coming down.
All right, cool. All right, we're getting close to the end here. Let's talk about fitness. I'm a hiking strength and conditioning coach. And so when people contact me, it's always about getting in shape for their trip because they want it to be more safe. They want to avoid injury. They want to enjoy it more. When I'm watching videos of some of these YouTubers that are talking about Half Dome, they often complain a lot about being sore the next day. They're having a hard time on these trails. I always preach to my clients, and I always weave kind of 5 pillars that I call the Fit for Trips Big 5 into their programs. And it's 1, walk inclines, which could be treadmill, hills, or hiking with hills. They're not all equal, but we won't get into that. That's 1. 2, walk stairs. Get the benefit of going up the stairs. You got that strength and endurance component. And then you've got the descending strength, what we call eccentric strength coming down. That's 2. 3, walk lunges, just more of a catch-all term for strength training. 4 is walk far, which is all relative, usually with a heavy pack. And then 5 is HIIT training. We don't need to get into those, but I just wanted to see if we can flush out anything on your mind about fitness, either what you preach to your clients or what's worked for you. I mean, you live in an area where you can hike frequently, and most people don't. So I always like to talk to people who don't have access to frequent hiking to get in shape. That's why I came up with the Big 5. So just any thoughts on that? Anything you want to flush out? Any comments on that? Just fitness in general?
Yeah, no, when I first heard your top 5 there, I kind of was nodding the whole way through it, because I do agree with that. I think that when I'm talking to clients and prospective clients coming out to do Half Dome or backpack trip in Yosemite, I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs, as we talked about, like even like natural staircases or ones that have been kind of also built by man to get through the difficult areas. But, the mountains themselves, there's many ups and downs. So one thing I commonly tell people is, number 1 is like, get off the couch and start, if you're involved in regular physical activities, that's going to make this kind of hike or backpacking trip more comfortable for sure. And then if you could do anything that mimics the activity, and that's exactly what you're doing with your 5 recommendations there. And so we always say, get out, hike some hills, do Stairmasters if you don't do that, both up and down. And I agree with you as well, hiking far and increasing those distances. So maybe, you're used to doing, mile hike, every day or whatnot. And maybe you try and increase that, or on some weekend, maybe try and do a 7-mile hike round trip and whatnot, and kind of build up into stuff you can mimic. You might not hit the 14 to 16 miles, which is fine. If you're, getting out regularly and you're doing some Stairmasters or hill climbs and, you're increasing your distance, you're just going to make yourself that much more prepared for the trip and that much more comfortable throughout the trip as well.
Okay. Just a few more questions, kind of out of the box type questions. We'll see what we can flush out. Maybe it'll be fun. Maybe we'll skip over them. Where do you see the future of guiding or backpacking? Again, we'll talk about the area of Yosemite. Where do you see the future of anything related to that, in the next few years, whether it becomes more popular or maybe people pull back from it? I don't know. I'm just curious. Any thoughts?
It's a good question, because I know that, concern for us is always, Yosemite is due to renew or rewrite their wilderness plan. So everything that is allowed in Yosemite right now is all based on their plans and their development and their research and whatnot. They have talked about changing some of the rules in Yosemite so that, when you're backpacking, what they experience right now, some people get a permit to go into a trailhead, say, for example, Sunrise Lakes. I mean, usually what happens is people continue backpacking past that. But what they're noticing is their research shows them is people get that permit, go to those lakes and just camp there for 3 or 4 nights. And thus it becomes more of a crowded location. So they're trying to be sensitive to that, is the wilderness and the use in the wilderness and not having too many people trampling all over it. And so as they redo their wilderness plan, there may be some more regulations, whether it be that they decrease the amount of people who could be on any trail on any given day. Because like I said earlier, you need a backpacking trailhead permit to backpack. And those are all done via a quota system that they defined years ago. So they're going to revisit all that. And they may have some new rules that, okay, if you get into this quadrant on night 1, that means you have to move out of this area and be in a different area for night 2, just to keep people on the flow of traffic moving. Along with that wilderness plan revision that they do, there may be some new rules or hurdles or even less usability for guide services like us. We don't know what's going to come from that. They do know, the Park Service knows that there's a benefit to guide services, because obviously if we're booking people, that means there's people who feel a preference towards being guided and then doing it on their own. So they definitely don't want to make that non-existent. They want to find, a way to embrace that as well. But I think they're also looking to minimize the use in the wilderness overall to also protect the wilderness and make sure it's not just being trampled on all the times as well. So I do think that there's some changes that might be coming. How it's going to affect us, we're not quite sure until it rolls out. But I think it's for the betterment of the wilderness experience for all. So I do have respect for that as well.
Okay. Are there any commonly held beliefs in your industry that you strongly disagree with? I know this is another out of the box question there.
Not necessarily. One thing that comes to mind though is, I don't know, I've experienced times where there's some people, I think there's different levels of, environmentalism. Because some people, and especially if they work for the park, they may have a certain belief that there shouldn't be as many people visiting the park, for example. And then there's, different people to know there's ways to make it so that the parks are able to be visited by more people so they could get that experience in the national parks as well. So I think there is that going on, that there's like these, different levels of environmentalism and how different people might just kind of perceive how the wilderness should be used. And I think that's all some of the stuff that will come up as they revisit their wilderness plan. As you know, too, even in Yosemite right now, another big concern is the visitation. And so this year, they're going to have reservations required to visit the park for their prime periods. We experienced this after COVID, and they had it in place for like 3 years, not just because of COVID. They ran into some major construction projects that they just figured we can't have as many people within the gates because with these major construction projects going on. But then last year, 2023, they removed the reservations and it was pretty bad, especially down in the Yosemite Valley, the amount of traffic and visitation. And it did take away from the overall visitors' experience. So this year, they're going to have reservations back in place for the busier times, as I think every weekend from Memorial Day through September. And then also pretty much the prime period of June, July, August. You can find it right on their main website when you go to Yosemite. Of course, if you get a half-dome permit on your own or you book one of our trips, you get entrance to the park. That's included. If you book lodging in a park, it's included. Plus, you could just go onto the website and apply for access and a reservation yourself for any period of time. And they've tried to make it easier, more available, just by experimenting with it over the different years. And I think they're doing a really good job. I kind of agree that it adds to the user's experience who do have the reservations. Some people are totally against the reservations because they say this is our national park. But if you had seen the traffic and the amounts of people and how they were parking off the roads and in areas that they shouldn't be, it's not healthy for the environment. So I appreciate what the park's doing there with the reservations. Okay,
cool. Any kind of upcoming projects, initiatives, new itineraries, anything that you're involved in or anything you want to share?
I mean, we have, if you visit our website, lastingadventures.com, you can see everything we do. We also have a lastingadventures.org website, as we are a nonprofit, and that's kind of more of our nonprofit angle. But, checking out any of our trips in Yosemite, including the ones that don't include Half Dome, takes you a little bit further away from some of the crowds who are kind of getting around Half Dome. In addition to other parks we operate, we offer some amazing trips up in Olympic National Park, as well as some summer trips in Joshua Tree National Park that are pretty outstanding. So those are, worth checking out as well. I recently I'm a Sierra person. I've done all my backpacking, majority of it in the Sierra. And I did a coastal itinerary that we offer up in Olympic National Park along the famous North Coast, almost the most northwest point in the continental U.S. And you're having to time yourself around the tides so you can walk along the beach when the tides are low and going around headlands. And that was an experience like no other. And it's pretty exciting as well. And even though it was less miles, it was still challenging because you're walking along the beach and rocks and whatnot. So different kind of experience, different park, but that's what we're about at Lasting Adventures too. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent. All right, folks, that's Scott Gehrman. Is that how you pronounce it, Scott?
Yeah, that works. Gehrman, either or. Yeah.
Got it. Well, you're the man, and I'm so grateful for your time. My goal is to make sure that people are confident about visiting the park and particularly doing Half Dome. My hope is that they will reach out to you and go with you or your company or one of your awesome guides. It sounds like it's obvious. They can get in touch with you by going to your website. If people are concerned about fitness, then of course, contact me. Go to fitfortrips.com/consultation and we'll have a discussion about, putting this iconic place on your bucket list, and then let's just get her done. So anyway, it's been a pleasure. I really am grateful for your time, and we'll be in touch, my friend. Sound good?
Thank you, Marcus. I really enjoyed the time as well.
Okay. Have a super day.
You too. Bye-bye.
That concludes this episode of the Hike Strong podcast. I'm committed to keeping all of the episodes for free. All I ask is that you subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends. My goal is to build a vast community of hikers with the confidence to crush any local or global trail. I hope you will join me in this endeavor. So until next time, train, hike, repeat, and as always, I'm here to support you every step of the way.